And this session will be chaired by Mr. Anirban Ghosh, Chief Sustainability Officer, Mahindra Group. We have with us Mr. Vedanta Kumar, Head of Transport and Industry, International Climate Strategy COP26. Mr. A.S. Gopal, Managing Director, Energy Efficiency Services Limited, EESL. Sri Debashish, Chairman, HITCO, and Additional Chief Secretary, Government of West Bengal. Sri Prabhat Kumar Mishra, Principal Secretary of Department of Transport, Government of West Bengal, is joining us soon. Dr. Prabodh Bajpayee, Associate Professor, Electrical Engineering, Energy Science and Engineering, India, IIT Kharagpur. Mr. Uday Mehta, Deputy Executive Director, CUTS International. Mr. Hemang Shah, India Head, EO Charging India. Ms. Hoimonti Poddar, Senior Energy, Climate Change and Urban Advisor, Prosperity Team, UK Trade, Economics and Prosperity, British Deputy High Commission, Kolkata. So with this, I would request Mr. Ghosh to take the session forward. I'll let you know once Mr. Prabhat Mishra is in. Rest of the speakers have already joined. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm guessing all the speakers are visible already.
Sir, the tech team will kind of customize the screen for the audience as you take forward the session. And Mr. Mishra has already joined us, just to inform you.
Fantastic. So thank you very much for joining the EV forum for the discussion today. EVs, as you know, is something that is going to be a very big part of the climate solution. There's a lot of activity and a lot of efforts going on at this point in time. And I'm sure in the course of this session, you will get to know lots about the developments and the expectations. So without wasting too much time, let us dive into the conversation. And let me invite Mr. Vedanta Kumar, Head of Transport and Industry, International Climate Strategy COP26, to begin the discussions today. Mr. Vedanta Kumar. Vedanta Kumar.
Many thanks for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this event today. I wish that I could be there in West Bengal. I was in Calcutta not long ago, and I love the city, but obviously times being what they are, that's not possible. And I'm sorry for everything that has been going on in the city. The hardship that has been experienced over there. I'd like to start by just giving a little bit of an introduction, and that's what really my talk will be about, an introduction to the problem that we're going to talk about today. So road transport accounts for over 7% of global emissions. That's almost 3/4 of all transport-related emissions. So from the perspective of climate change, which is the angle that I come from, it's a really crucial sector. And there are 3 big climate-related reasons why we want to reduce emissions from road transport. There are the emissions from the vehicles themselves. Obviously, if you're burning petrol, you're releasing CO2. It's also shifting the incentives for the oil industry. So passenger vehicles make up approximately 1/4 of global oil demand. So if you move from the current petrol and diesel vehicles to alternative forms of vehicles like electric vehicles, you're going to shift the incentives of the oil industry and again help decarbonize that massive sector. And thirdly, why it's so important is that through the production of electric vehicles, you scale up battery production. Obviously, batteries are used in the electric vehicles themselves. And that is really helpful for helping decarbonize the power sector, which will rely, as we move to a more electrified power system, more renewable, in the power system, will rely on storage solutions like batteries. So it's a really crucial sector from the perspective of climate change. But there are other reasons why we want to do this. One is related to air quality. And, I've spent a lot of time in India myself. I think we can all agree that air quality isn't always great. And if we can move towards electric mobility, we'll reduce nitrogen dioxide emissions and potentially reduce other forms of particulate matter with all the benefits that that brings. We'll also improve energy security. And this is a key driver in the UK. It's a key driver in many countries for moving to e-mobility. To give you an example, in India, 80% of India's vehicle fuel is dependent on imports. And by moving to electric mobility, you can have that greater resource security. This is actually a geopolitical issue, not just a climate issue. And also jobs. Moving to electric mobility brings jobs in battery production. And if you add up the total jobs needed to build an electric car versus, say, a petrol car, in total they're higher, and lots of studies have been done on this. So we want to do it, and I assume we want to do it. The question is, then how do we do it? And there are three main ways. So we need to, on the one hand, shift away from private ownership towards mass transit. We need active mobility, where we walk and cycle a little bit more. But there are going to be vehicles, and there are going to be more vehicles, and we need to make them zero emission. And that means electric or hydrogen. But EVs, electric mobility, has really taken off, and so that's where a lot of the energy is at the moment. I'll focus on that last bit in this talk, and I think that's what we're going to focus on today. Really moving to electric mobilities, where we have vehicles, making sure they're zero emission, making sure they're electric. So the question is, well, where are we when it comes to EVs, electric mobility? They've been growing every year exponentially. And you look at the IEA, the International Energy Agency, has a global EV outlook, a comprehensive set of analysis on this. And you can see that exponential growth. And it's amazing to see. And I think we're all aware that the electric mobility sector has fared very well in the time of COVID-19 globally, as compared to its petrol and diesel counterparts. Another thing that's really encouraging is that some projections suggest that electric vehicles could reach price parity, so they could be the same cost, and then obviously after that undercut petrol and diesel cars by the mid-2020s. So that's not far off. They can actually be cheaper. And what's also encouraging is that everyone is behind this movement to some extent. Industry, countries, states, investors. Tesla is the most valuable car company on the planet today. And that suggests what investors think is going to happen in the future. And, very glad to be presented by the chair today. Mahindra Electric is a really great example of what the auto industry can do to make this transition happen. So there's progress, and zero-emission vehicles are the future. But what I want to say today and make clear is that it's not happening fast enough. So this change is happening, but just not quickly enough. Before COVID-19 hit, global emissions from road transport were rising faster than in any other sector. And the most optimistic estimates that we've seen show that electric vehicles will make up half of all new global car sales by 2040. That's far too slow. That basically means in 2050, we'll have lots of petrol cars, diesel cars still on the road. And that means missing our Paris commitments and all the catastrophic damage that could cause. And I don't need to say, India is projected to experience 1/4 of global GDP loss from climate change. It's in particularly important. But developed countries have to lead the way on this. And I finally want to add to another risk is that COVID-19 has hit the auto industry hard. There's a risk that countries respond by supporting the industry, by supporting the same old forms of production, petrol and diesel cars, rather than seizing the opportunity to transform the economy towards the future, zero-emission vehicles. So I'll finish this talk by just a little bit on how do we speed this up? If that's the problem, how do we make it go quicker? How do we move quicker to electric mobility? From other speakers who are much better informed on many of these topics, you'll hear about some of the specific barriers and issues that need to be overcome: charging infrastructure, battery production, and so on. But we also need a collective vision about where we want to go. And only then can we choose our path. And I say a collective vision because where it's hard in the Paris Agreement to get 190 countries, though we did it, to agree to the same principle, with vehicles, it's much smaller. 15 countries account for 80, including India, account for 80% of the global vehicle market or car market. And that is obviously enormous. It's very concentrated. And if we together can form a collective vision, we can definitely set the trend of where the world's headed. So we want to use COP26 to build that vision. And in the run-up to COP26, the UK is launching an international campaign to double the pace of the transition to zero-emission vehicles. What that means is that we want to see a world where by 2040 or earlier, all new vehicles are zero-emission. And in the UK itself, we're consulting on a phase-out date in the 2030s. So I'll finish by just our asks in the run-up to this, in this campaign. What are we asking? We're calling on, to build this collective vision, businesses with fleets to sign up to the EV100 campaign and commit to only buying zero-emission vehicles by 2030. I'm happy to provide more details about that afterwards. We're calling on vehicle manufacturers and investors to commit to producing only zero-emission vehicles by 2040 or earlier. We're calling on states and cities to commit to implementing policies in line with these commitments. And West Bengal's done a fantastic job with its commitment to have only electric buses by 2030. Can it extend that to other road vehicles? That would be the ask. And West Bengal's obviously a real leader in this area. And finally, we're a government, and we're calling on other governments to work together on the practical challenges to make this happen. There's no forum yet for political leaders from these countries, these 15 countries, to get together and collectively agree on what that transition should look like and how they can help each other overcome the barriers to the transition. So we're building that forum. And just to give a sense of what it might include, we're trying to think of what a collective vision could be. Maybe it's articulating our collective innovation needs to global markets. Maybe it's conveying a shared trajectory towards zero-emission vehicles. But we're building this, and we'll be inviting India to be part of it. So I want to finish there, and obviously I'll stick around for questions. But thank you again for having me, and I really look forward to hearing the other speakers on this panel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar. You've made it clear that electric vehicles are required, and very soon we'll have price parity. The change is not happening fast enough. We need collective vision. And COP26 has a very strong ask. I hope people respond. Actions have been happening in India. In fact, a lot of them are sort of aligned to the asks that COP26 is asking of us. Let's move to Mr. Gopal, who's the Managing Director of Energy Efficiency Services Limited, an organization that is trying to transform mobility in India. Mr. Gopal, tell us a little more about the EV revolution that you all are trying to trigger in India. I've been remiss, I should have mentioned, the first round of comments around 7 minutes each. Mr. Kumar's done a wonderful job, and I'm sure the rest of you will continue doing that. Mr. Gopal, your turn.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank BCC for giving me an opportunity to be present in this forum and express my views on e-mobility, what ESL has done on e-mobility side, and what needs to be done further on the expansion of e-mobility, on building up of the charging infra, and as well as with respect to the government policies and regulations, because the government policies and regulations are going to play a very significant role in the expansion of the e-mobility plan. As all of us know, India has started a very ambitious national e-mobility plan, and the center as well as the many state governments have taken various steps in enabling the e-mobility program in India. The shift from petrol and diesel engine based transport to electric vehicle is expected to significantly lower the financial burden of the government by reduction in the oil imports. So electric vehicles are less polluting than the ICE vehicles and fits well with the government vision of reducing carbon emission reduction in the country. And the objectives of promoting e-mobility of the government is to reduce the dependence on the import of oil, promote power capacity addition in India, thereby enhancing energy security of the country, and further reducing the GHG emission from the transport sector. India's goal to reach 30% of EV penetration by 2030 with an estimate of saving of around 474 million tons of oil import, and cutting down the CO2 emission reduction by 846 million tons is going to play a very important role going forward. ESL, through its national e-mobility program, has been developing electric cars in ministries and in government departments, and thereby showing a commitment to the governments towards the rapid adoption of the e-mobility program. The adoption of e-mobility program largely depends upon the providing proper charging infrastructure. And in order to achieve a faster growth of electric mobility, it is necessary to develop the entire ecosystem together. ESL is working on deployment of e-vehicles as well as on the developing of the charging infra in the country. And at ESL, so far we have deployed around 2,000 vehicles in the various government departments. And we have not only deployed the vehicles, we have put around 600 chargers across the captive chargers across the country, and about 100 chargers on public charging stations have been put. Going forward, the company has a massive expansion plan of putting around 1,000 chargers across various cities in the country, and these charging infra will be covered under the DHI subsidy, FAME subsidy. So to scale up the EV program in the country, the state government policies as well as the incentive schemes will play a very crucial role. As all of us know, FAME scheme indeed has built up an initial push and necessary momentum required by giving an outlay of around 10,000 crores towards incentives. And out of that, around 1,000 crores is towards building of the charging infra, public charging infra in the country. So the government has issued various EV guidelines, like setting up of at least one public charging station to be available at a grid of 3 by 3 kilometers within the city, amending and modifying the town planning guidelines and the building plans to mandatorily have a charging station for public use. So these attempts, these government policies are going to play a very important role going forward. And as we know, the Delhi government has recently come with their own e-mobility policy, which says within a year, all the government vehicles in the city will be put under the e-mobility plan. So ESL, through its national program, is looking for adoption of better and improved large range EV vehicles, because in the adoption of the electric vehicles, the range of the vehicles that are currently coming in the market is very crucial, because the larger adoption will come when there is a long range vehicles coming on the roads. And not only that, several manufacturers like Tata, Mahindra, Hyundai are launching their long range vehicles which can run up to 300 or 350 kilometers at a single charge. So the two factors are going to play a very important role. One is the deployment of the large range vehicles on the road. Another is with regard to the putting up of the public charging stations at various places. The public charging stations should cover mainly the malls, the hospitals, the markets, where a lot of people commute during the daytime and at the night time. ESL has taken one more step to expand the program. It has tried to capture some of the fleet operators, because the fleet operators are running the vehicles, or have a fleet of vehicles, and deploying a large amount of vehicles through the fleet operators will further aid up the program. And ESL has tied up with some of the fleet operators for deployment of the bulk vehicles on the road. ESL, not only that, ESL has developed a very unique model for the e-vehicle deployment as well as the public charging infra. In the initial stage, it is covering the most of the government departments, where most of the vehicles are hired from the agencies. So ESL has developed a model where the vehicles are being leased to these government departments, these cab operators, so that they, with the same expenditure, with the same amount that they are paying towards the leased vehicles that they have obtained for electric as well as the diesel engines, their expenditure doesn't go up. They are able to deploy more efficient vehicles, e-vehicles, within the budget amount or within the expenditure that they are already deploying. So ESL has developed a unique model where the vehicles are being leased to the various entities. Most of it are government departments, keeping the expenditure, whatever they are spending towards right now, those expenditures have been kept into account while deciding the lease amount. And not only that, the captive chargers have been provided in the buildings at the locations where these vehicles have been deployed, and the entire maintenance, the servicing of the vehicles, everything is being taken care of by ESL. So that way, till date, it has been able to deploy around 2,000 vehicles, and going forward, it has a massive plan of deploying about 6,000 to 7,000 vehicles in the current financial year. Though the deployment has a little bit affected by the current COVID situations, but going forward, it is expected that as and when the situation improves, there will be a larger adoption of the vehicles by the departments, by the consumers, by the fleet operators. Apart from that, to boost not only the deployment as well as the building of the charging infra is necessary. It is necessary to boost the manufacturing also. And with this regard, the central and state policies are very much essential by giving the incentives to the consumers who procure the vehicles, and not only that, the bringing the awareness about the benefit of the electric vehicle is very much required, and a comprehensive awareness program is the need of the hour. So the ESL is doing a massive awareness program also among the consumers, telling them about how adopting a electric vehicle will bring down their expenditure, how they are more economical as compared to the diesel vehicles and the petrol vehicles, and what is the value addition to the society by reducing the carbon emission reduction and all. So those awareness programs are being run. So going forward,
if you rollout of the coming to a close.
Yeah, for faster rollout of the EV program, the policy interventions are required for reducing the high manufacturing cost of the EV and addressing the range anxiety among the consumers. The Indian EV industry right now is largely dependent upon the import of the batteries and the electronic components. And since there is a lot of emphasis on the localization of the products, so more inclination towards increasing the efficiency and reducing the cost will increase the adoption of the EV vehicles going forward. So with that,
wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. Gopal, and may ESL help India deliver the COP26 asks. You are well on your way. In fact, I'm thinking maybe you should be given a bigger budget, because I've started seeing advertisements of why petrol cars are better than diesel cars starting to appear again in the newspapers after maybe almost 15 years or 20 years when I used to last see things like this. So it's time we started seeing ads on why electric cars are better than either petrol or diesel. And maybe we should get you a budget for that. Despite all the policies, the FAME policy, the effort that's getting made, we know that the traction that we are achieving in our country is still not enough. One of the hindrances probably is because policies tend to vary from state to state. So our next speaker, Mr. Uday Mehta, who's the Deputy Executive Director of Cuts International from Jaipur, will be telling us about policies that we have across our country, how do they compare, and so on. So, Mr. Uday Mehta, the floor is yours. The next 7 minutes, all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Perfect. Before I begin, just would like to acknowledge and thank BCCI for providing Cuts with the opportunity. And as some of you may also know, that we are also acting as a knowledge partner to this event. So thank you for that. Before I delve into the question put forward by the chair, I also wanted to highlight that having an EV policy is no benchmark for better levels of adoption. So I think that's very important for all of us to understand that having an EV policy, just in policy, is not really a panacea to solve all the problem. And to what better to understand or the evidence of this from where the event is hosted is a city from Kolkata, which has won the C40 Mayor's Award for the best city in clean transportation activity initiatives. That has shown that even in a subsidy agnostic environment, with the right kind of institutional structure in place, one can have better levels of EV uptake. So that's just the background and the context to what I wanted to highlight. And the specific question which was asked to me is, while we do have plethora of Indian EV policies in India, why is it that EV production and adoption has not fired up? And just to share some statistics just to contextualize my submission, according to the latest data published by the Society of Manufacturers of Electric Vehicles, the share of EV in total vehicles registered in India is at an unbelievable low, which is roughly close to 0.54% for two-wheeler vehicles, roughly around 0.36% for three-wheelers, and only 0.02% for four-wheelers. Now, this brings us to the question that even though there has been enough concerted efforts, and rightly so, very well aimed and also with the well objective by the central and state governments to push EV production uptake since 2015, why has it not kicked off? While policies have definitely been in place, I think one of the critical lacunas has been regulatory uncertainties and structural barriers. And I'll just flag on three important issues, while there could be some other issues which others can add on. But from our perspective, the first one is regulatory uncertainties and structural barriers. And what I mean by this is, while policies have definitely been in place, regulatory uncertainties and structural barriers have been the major culprits for its lag and its ineffective implementation. The first barrier comes in the form of limited choice and availability of EVs in India, given the nascent stage of the industry, as I've already given the figures in India, and ever-evolving technologies. Second point, in terms of the impediments, has been the high upfront cost of EVs. This challenge often gets overshadows the minimal cost of operations and also leads to low demand. Additionally, this also acts as a supply side barrier for a sector which has startups in the forefront of its production line. And the last important point, which also acts as an impediment, has been the lack of charging infrastructure and after-sales services. As has been also mentioned by my previous speaker, that it's extremely important to have a whole ecosystem approach before we really look at production of EVs in India. So while production and demand may have picked up pace, specifically in two-wheelers and three-wheeler sectors, the key impediment in the four-wheelers or commercial vehicle segment has been the lack of charging infrastructure and after-sales services. The Ministry of Power and various state electric policies have come up with several incentives for boosting the installation of public charging stations, as also was pointed out by my previous speaker. However, as of now, there are close to 300 charging stations which have been set up by EESL, and it has an aim to achieve close to 1,000 charging stations in the country by the end of year 20 to 21, and it also has an ambitious target of 10,000 stations in the next 3 years. In addition to this, one must acknowledge many manufacturers and OEMs have started to set up private charging stations at their dealership and workshops. But still the road is a long one to tread when it comes to achieving the number of charging stations as has been aimed or envisaged by the Ministry of Power which is 1 in every 9 square kilometers. So those are some of the reasons which I wanted to flag, which act as a barrier when it comes to implementation of policies in India. I'll stop here and wait for the chair to come back. Thank you very much.
That was short and sharp, Uday. Would you want to talk about varying policies across states? Is that
Sure.
an issue at all?
Sure. I'll take up the next question. There are obviously reasons for why policies are different from each other. And I also wanted to flag it from certain important perspective that one, given that the nature of policies and the geographical, social and economic conditions do vary in India, policies would also vary. There's nothing wrong in that. So one of the approaches why policies do differ is on the terms of the planning processes. And just to give you some examples, while in some states the planning process has happened through a participatively and consultative process, in some others the process has been purely replication. So just to give an example, in Telangana, the policy formulation has happened with the active support of knowledge partners such as National Research Development Corporation and Administrative Staff College of India, popularly known as ASCI, and they have also conducted stakeholder consultations. Similarly, in Delhi, Dialogue and Development Commission has been active partner of the government in the formulation process. The second important criteria where they do differ is on the objective and the vision of the policies. So while some states are keen on focusing on making themselves the pioneers of electric vehicle manufacturing by facilitating ease of doing business through the means of fiscal incentives, some others have also focused on the adoption and creation of an enabling environment through the deployment of support infrastructure for achieving environmental and sustainability goals. So one can see that there is a difference in the objectives and the vision of respective state policies. Just to quote some examples, if you look at the Andhra Pradesh EV policy, their focus has been to support every aspect of e-mobility, from accelerating adoption and making the state an EV hub. On a different note, if you look at the policy of Kerala government, on the other hand, has focused on leveraging e-mobility for fostering shared mobility and environmental sustainability. And it's also interesting, the Delhi government, which has just recently launched its revised EV policy, they have decided to focus on pacing up the adoption of EV policy and EV, especially in the two-vehicle segment, in public transportation and commercial vehicle segment. So there you can see some differences in terms of the vision and the objectives. Second point, which I want to touch upon in terms of the differences, has been the targets and timelines. And it's again very interesting to understand, in general, while the policy duration of all the states are in the range of 3 to 5 years, but it's also interesting that there are certain dimensions and differences when it comes to targets and roadmaps. So for example, Kerala government has set an ambitious target of putting 10 lakh electric vehicles on the road by 2022 and initiating the process with the help of pilot fleets of 2 lakh electric 2 vehicles, 50,000 electric 3 vehicles, and 1,000 e-good carriers. On the other hand, the government of Telangana has gone for phase target approach. And what they mean to say is that with a 25% electrification target by 2022, 50% for 2025, and 100% electrification target by 2030. So that's also the difference in terms of how states have approached the point of targets and timelines. And my last point, which I want to focus on in terms of the difference approach, has been on the policy implementation plan. And it's also interesting because at the end of the day, it's not just that you have to have a policy in place, it's also about implementation, and that's the key thing. And I think in India, one of the biggest challenges what we have a plethora of policies, laws and regulations. Implementation is where we actually go and fail. So the policy implementation process has been formulated again differently in different states. The key pillars of implementation are setting up of administrative units and creation of a state-level EV specific fund or corpus, for example, in state of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. While some other states have chosen to focus on creating technical committees such as Karnataka, or on the other hand, setting up of advisory councils such as in Telangana, some others have opted to establish corporations such as in Andhra Pradesh, or setting up of EV boards in Delhi. So that's the gist in terms of how different policies and how different states have approached the policies of formulating electric vehicle policy in India. Thank you.
If I look at this situation from a corporate lens, And imagine this situation to occur within a company, we would get very scared. So from a consumer's perspective, you're saying limited choice, high upfront cost, low supporting infrastructure like charging and servicing. On the other side, you have a plethora of different policies being implemented in different ways in different parts of the same country. Clearly, we've got a job on hand. And I'm just wondering how ESL is going to maneuver through all of this and make electric vehicles happen in all parts of the country. Perhaps maybe we should have we probably need something like a parliamentary committee, just like the one we have for GST, for coordination. Because if we don't have coordination on these issues, we haven't yet talked about standards of charging and stuff like that. Because if we start having different standards for charging across the country, then I think the project would have died before it started. In fact, that sets it up for the next intervention by Mr. Prabodh Bajpai, who's an associate professor of electrical engineering, energy science and engineering at the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. Sometimes we wonder that if we do have all the electric vehicles that we want on the roads, what impact will it have on the grid? So Professor Bajpai is going to give us a little insight into what's anticipated and what's expected. The next 7 minutes for you, Professor Bajpai.
Thank you, Mr. Nirban. I think I'm here audible to all of you.
Yes, you are.
May I allow to share the screen? I have a small presentation.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope my presentation is visible to all of you. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to interact with a set of good experienced people from the industry as well as from bureaucracy, and they all have the good experience on this. So as the coordinator has already given the questionnaire to keep the outline within those points. So it was good for me to maintain this outline with those questions. So I will roam around these points one by one and we'll talk about these. So as the topic is PHEV integration to smart grid, so I kept one slide for smart grid. So smart grid is nothing but the conventional grid with a lot of new information and communication technology amalgamation basically, where you can see in this slide, along with the power network, which is shown as a continuous orange line, there are a lot of dotted network line is also shown, telecommunication network. And that is the meaning of smart grid actually, to bring in some intelligence through remote monitoring and control. And definitely for that, we need a strong communication network, and that will help to monitor as well as control different components of the system. And there are a lot of new sensor technologies coming up which help us to get the data, and along with the new storage and EV technologies coming up with the distributed energy systems. So that is the idea with which the smart grid concept is moving around. When we talk about the power system, so in conventional power system, we have generation, distribution, transmission, and we have pumped hydro storage. We generally provide the flexibility to the power system through the conventional generation as well as demand side program and this pumped hydro storage. But nowadays, the sector is coupled with new technologies like electric vehicle. We are coming with the fuel cell technology based on hydrogen. We are coming up with a lot of electric heat pump to provide the heating load and the cooling load. And that's how the flexibility aspect of the power system is governed by the new kind of components in the system, where the electric vehicle will definitely play an important role because it work as both source and sink of the power. And it is individually, if we say that each one is very small, but if it talk about the large quantum of PHEV, then the importance is significant. The first question is the challenge. What challenge is this integration will impose? Definitely, it is a big challenge from the system operator point of view, because it impacts the performance of the system. especially the distribution network. The distribution network was not designed for such kind of load. So if we go for a large amount of PHEV, either charging or discharging, it will definitely impact the voltage performance as well as it will increases the loss. So if there is no control measure on the charging pattern, the reliability may definitely sacrifice. And there are a lot of studies has been done on the simulation platform where the dependency of charging pattern or the time of charge is highly correlated with the system performance, and it is desirable that most of the such vehicles are put on charging when they come back to the home after the workplace in the evening, and preferably in the late evening or midnight. So that is what has been shown in the various studies. Definitely we can overcome it. There is nothing which cannot be overcome. So we can definitely overcome it. And in the conventional system, we have a lot of components in the power system like generation, distributed generation, storage, demand side management, and this hydro power as a flexibility provider. But at the same time, EVs can also be used for this purpose. And that can be done through the smart charging approach. And that will definitely reduce the additional investment in the flexible but carbon intensive fossil fuel power plant as a flexible sources. And that will also help to balance the renewable integration in the system. So in this way, EV will lead the way to unleash the synergies between the low carbon transport mode as well as the renewable energy integration. So both the aspects will be taken care of. Now this is a very interesting curve which shows the net load of a power system. On the y-axis, the megawatt power is shown, and the x-axis is the time scale on 24 hours. You can visualize it as a duck because assuming over the years from 2012 to 20, it is shown as the solar PV integration will be such a large content that the valley will be created in the load profile. And that valley is actually creating a downward ramp, additional downward ramp basically compared to the original net load curve, and the night or the evening ramp will also be increased. So that is the new challenge coming from the system operator point of view, because the desirable curve is a flat curve, and here we are getting an additional downward curve as well as the evening ramp has increased. So a simple example how to support through the electric vehicle is this. So with respect to the timeline, actually, if you see, so as an electric vehicle owner, he is supposed to start for his work from his home around morning time, and on the road, he will discharge the vehicle while going to the office. Once it reaches the office, there has to be a proper parking or charging station where it can put up on the charge so that he can move on with the charged vehicle to go back to his home. And again, it will discharge over the road while going to home. And after reaching the home, it can put again it to the charging. But it has to be a smart coordinated charging where it will be at office parking lot or it will be at home. It can also provide vehicle to grid. It is not necessary that vehicle can always discharge to the road, because the capacity of the current technology provides the charging for which can be used for more than one day. So it's not necessary that everyday charging and discharging is fully required. So there are definitely various possible approaches and steps are available. First one is a smart coordinated charging, as I mentioned. Energy storage in PHEV plays a significant role because it may help also to reduce the fluctuations in the renewable generation as a controllable source and sync both. And in recent times, the electricity market is also accessible as an aggregator agent through the PHEVs, so where they can also participate. So, as we have earlier speakers have mentioned about the smart parking areas, the design of those is also critical step here. So the learnings till now, we can say that PHEV penetration is going to be high in next few years, and that will definitely help to reduce the carbon emission from the transport sector. At the same time, will opportunities. So every challenge brings the new opportunities, and here the opportunity of going for a hybrid AC/DC grid, and which will definitely help a lot because, as I've told you, there are a lot of loads which are coming up, which are basically DC in nature. A lot of sources are coming, storage is coming, which is AC in nature. So it is a cost-effective and appropriate way has to be found to integrate both together or hybridize both together. Common standards for DC grid has to be made. net metering, protection, grounding equipment has to be prepared accordingly. And implementation in the new building is easier, but the existing building may be a challenge. We have developed a hybrid AC/DC microgrid in our one of the academic lab complex building, where we have PV as a major source, because wind is not a good source here. So we are using wind turbine generator emulator system. We have a hybrid of solar, the battery system, supercapacitor, fuel cell together as a hybrid storage system. And it's AC microgrid and the DC microgrid together with the bidirectional inverter between and connected with the main grid. So it can work as both a standalone mode as well as the grid connected mode. So finally, I want to summarize the thing, like a smart grid or intelligent grid has a strong correlation with the ICT and developed together. And the current distribution network has to be active and bidirectional, which is the challenge. And the large scale deployment of PHEV is also critical. And it is both advantageous as well as challenging. And the new things which is to be done is the smart coordinated charging is important. And it can reduce the fluctuation of renewable energy generation, and it can reduce the infrastructure. It needs actually a new infrastructure for smart parking, as well as it can help as the aggregator agent in the electricity market. And this is one of my paper published some time back as issues and solution approaches in PHEV integration, which has more than 100 references. It's a good reference to find more about this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bajpai. Interesting to see the curve that you showed us, the duck-shaped curve. At one level, you would think that when the demand drops like that for the conventional energy, it could be quite dangerous. At another level, I was thinking about a curve that I'd seen for a place in South Australia, which has a lot of rooftop renewable energy coming up. According to them, projections are that there is going to be a time of day when the grid will not be required, because everyone will have adequate power from whatever they are generating, and they're wondering, how do we deal with this situation? I hope we don't have to deal with a situation like that. Given the way in which we are proceeding with renewable energy, probably we won't face that situation, but that's even more scary. But in a situation like this, given the policy uncertainty, the product uncertainty, and the various kinds of uncertainties that we've talked about. But yet we know that this is something which is, EVs are something which is a big solution for the future. What keeps us going are interesting experiments and success stories that happen in a society at this point in time. So we are going to discuss a couple of those now. May I invite Shri Debashish Sen, who's the chairman of Housing Infrastructure Development Corporation Limited and the additional Chief Secretary, Government of West Bengal, to tell us about e-mobility initiatives in Rajarhat and show us how, despite all the difficulties, interesting, successful initiatives are being implemented. Mr. Sen, the next 7 minutes, all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. Thank you, Prabhat, for being here, and many other known faces, Rishikesh Chandu, Himanti Poddar, Angana Gorai, and all the others. Mr. Uday Mehta rightly said that you need an ecosystem for the whole thing to work out. It's in its infancy. Many things are getting changed. All these points have been highlighted. But I am very happy to say that only yesterday or day before yesterday, I came to know that New Town, Kolkata at Rajarhat has been rated platinum by, it's got a platinum rating from the Green City angle by IGBC, which is a unit of CII. Mr. Mehta talked about C40 in Kolkata, and we tiny, itsy bitsy, small, new, modern Singapore of Kolkata. We have one of the very, very few cities in the country of India to have received the platinum rating in gold, in Green City category. And in this citation or in this certification that they have given, and I read from that on e-mobility, they have mentioned these things, and I am reading this out for BVT, and for highlighting that you need an ecosystem. I'll go slightly within my time limit on that, but let me read it out for you, and I quote, e-mobility. The city has planned for operating e-buses, necessary infrastructure like bus terminus, bus bays, charging stations, maintenance offices, workshop, and a maintenance pit is also developed. E-3-wheelers are used for last mile connectivity. Norms have been promulgated for 2% of the car parking to be reserved for e-vehicles. And they go on to talk into other matters. So what we don't realize, people are sometimes saying that you need charging stations. All very good. But where will the vehicle stay for the period of charging and create a mess up? Think of Ma flyover. One vehicle's tire breaks down and the whole kilometers of flyover are jammed. So in an urban space, you need a holistic planning, and that is what we are planning to do. And we are therefore saying that go to the last mile. Yesterday, again, we had an event with the e-rickshaws. Are you aware, many are, but just making a point, that these days, even these totos, as we call it, these autos are gone. That kata tel, we used to say, they used to mix all kinds of things and produce enormous amount of pollution. That is gone because of coal. It is now LPG or CNG, and now it's gone, and it's battery powered totos. And now that is gone. The normal pedal powered cycle rickshaw, people are now retrofitting with 2,500 rupees battery packs, and off they go. People will find out a place. And we are taking it a step forward. We are making bicycling, which is already talked about, many of them, including Vedanta has spoken about that. So cycling, but e-cycling, we are putting it in. Give your leg muscles a bit of rest. That is what we found. We are angling that up to 5 kilometers you can cycle. Why get into a bus at all? Why spend enormous amount of time into bus? But we are running bus. As Mr. Ghosh said, for the last 3 years, we are running only 3 buses. And we have been carrying close to 3 lakh passengers. And I have all the figures and everything to give you, because we take 10 rupee flat fee just to keep an account of it. And because we had to run, we had to get all those things that was mentioned, you know, the workshop, the pit, the operator, the driver, and everything, and the charger stations. And therefore, my very good colleague, Mr. Prabhat Mishra, Dr. Prabhat Mishra, I think, has been kind enough to put 50 more e-buses into the system, another 12 into the system. And I'm close to reaching 100 target. Because I had started with these 3 and I had to put the infrastructure, and on this infrastructure further things are coming up. I have also put infrastructure for the last mile, for the 3-wheeler rickshaws and other things, but they together form an ecosystem that encourages people to go in for the vehicular system. As Mr. Ghosh very rightly said, I mean, why doesn't EECL have a great budget to influence people? And we have been building awareness by leading from the front. I have been driving, as Mr. Ghosh is probably aware of, I have been traveling in the E2O model 0 kind of a thing, with a 2-door thing now into the 4-door thing. And I have been moving people, and people are saying, wow, you could have got into a Honda City, which my BDOs often do by hiring Honda City. And I am traveling in the tiny Mitsubishi Mahindra E2 version 2. So this is awareness, this is leading, this is working within the system. And we are not leaving the larger thing also. Larger thing means metro. Metro, of course, it's beyond for any city level governance system to go into, but we are at it, helping them. And for the regions which are not connected, we are thinking of monorail, and we have actually invited an expression of interest, and this will interest Mr. Mehta and Mr. Vedanta and others. We have actually invited, and it's live, an expression of interest. We are saying from Action Area 1 to Action Area 3, a distance of 7.5 kilometers, There is no metro roll. So in the next 10 years, 20 years, will people keep on walking and emitting all kinds of things? So we are saying, give us solutions. It can be monorail, it can be LRT, it can be ropeway as well. I have seen in London, my observation is with Mr. Vedanta, in London and Canary Bay, I think in 2012, I have seen that they have got a British Emirates kind of a ropeway. So urban transportation, I need to transport 7.5 kilometers for the urban people, and there is no possibility of any metro coming up. How do I do that? How do I do mass transit in these regions? And therefore, we are looking even for pods. Somebody had come with an active solution of having pods. You know, in Heathrow Airport, we have seen people going from place to place, driverless trains. And so pods can take people also in these places. And we are exploring, because we are not talking of tomorrow. We are talking of 10 years hence, 20 years hence. And if we have to look forward, we have to do this. And meanwhile, we run our 100 electric buses. Meanwhile, we have, and I have tied up with ESL, Mr. Gopal was talking, of the charging stations. We have willingly given them space, and we are getting a very good PPP model and another 25 charging stations at no cost to the government. We are only giving, as we have done to the ESL, fast charging station, the land, the piece of parking area where they can put it, and the connection is given, all cost operation theirs. For every kilowatt sold, they give us 70 paisa to the system. And now a tender is on for 25 such battery banks, no cost to the government. We only give a space for them to put it up, and for every kilowatt hour they consume, 70 paisa comes back to us, no expenses by us. Why are we doing this? Do you think we are just doing it for the fun of it? Dekh lete kya hota? The 3 electric buses put us the charging stations, and now we are close to 100. And these 25, I am told, people are saying, if there is the annuity model, don't talk about cost. If the per kilometer running cost is less, the upfront cost is of course more. So we realize, if you look at it as an annuity, think of EMI when we pay our home loans. If it is equated installments, I mean, no matter what is the cost, you shall recover after n number of days. And this is what is happening. I don't know, Mr. Ghosh, in the private sector in Bangalore, this is happening. They are saying we don't want any subsidy from the government. We don't want any policies which vary from state to state. We just want a place for our vehicles to be charged in the evening. You see, when the offices are closed, the things have to be charged. And we will go to corporates, the TCS, the Gitobit, and where 36,000 people are staying. And they are saying, we'll charge it out, and we will recover money on equated things, so it's not bad for them. It's the banker that gives the money to buy it, and it's an absolutely workable solution. And my almost last comment is for that we need a holistic ecosystem again coming up, and we are trying a very ambitious kind of a thing, is Uberization of the transport, even in the last mile connectivity, which is in the totos and autos and e-bicycles, as I call. These we are trying to integrate, Prabhat, with the Pathodisha, and we are talking to a few people so that you can plan your journey before leaving the home, that here is a bus going to come. I take 2 minutes to walk to the bus stop and for going to the Toto stand, and this is how I can plan, and I can go without using my personal vehicle. So there's a great deal of innovation that we can still do within the policy uncertainty, but I will end it one thing only. 3 times our tender for buying 3 electric buses have failed. This is the 4th time that is valid. We are not getting surplus. We are willing to pay. We are willing to pay and buy electric buses more. But somehow, I don't know, the market is not very reactive. And if that is a problem that could be addressed, I'm sure the EV thing would go. My last word, my true last word, not the false last word, is I would end with what again Mr. Vedanta and Mr. Uday said, is that I also think that for the heavy units, for the earth-moving vehicles, for the cranes, for the heavy buses and trucks, we should go for hydrogen vehicle things, and policy making think tank should work upon it. Electricity in the manner that we are doing, we are just not burning the coal at Kolkata, we are burning the coal at Bengal, and this doesn't solve the problem. Thank you very much.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Sen. For heavy vehicles, hydrogen is indeed the solution. The Energy Transition Commission has a very good report on this and talks about different kinds of transportation and suitable solutions for each one of them. So, and I can tell you that what you've said is written in that report, Mission Possible. So one hopes that there will be more focus on that. Thank you very much. It's always wonderful to hear about initiatives of this kind in a nascent, not just industry, but a nascent ecosystem. And it's only experiments, initiatives, efforts of this kind that show us what can possibly succeed and what is the way to expand this and make it grow. So best wishes to you. May you make not just Rajarhat, but all of Calcutta and all of West Bengal, thrive with green transport. And you've set it up very nicely for Shri Prabhat Mishra. And in case you're right, then Dr. Prabhat Mishra, who's IAS Principal Secretary, Department of Transport, to tell us more about the success story of e-buses in Kolkata. Dr. Mishra,
thank you.
Next 7 minutes, all yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful session on e-mobility. And I completely agree with Devashish Sen sir when he concluded that if 80 buses, 40 of them were of 9-meter length and 40 of them were of 12-meter length. They have been put on the road. The scheme also included some 80 charging stations and 50. In fact, we have been able to put all these buses on road, 80 buses on road, and around 77 charging stations have been put up. Out of that, there are some 57 slow chargers and 20 fast chargers. They have been installed at 10 depots and 9 terminus for charging during the trips. Now, the thing has been going on quite well, but there are a large number of issues that have come up. Just to go into economics, we have seen that the buses are plying for around 2.5 lakh kilometers in a month, and is really able to help in terms of carrying the passenger load. The cost of electricity is turning out to be around rupees 13 per kilometer, whereas the average earning is around rupees 45 for both kinds of buses per kilometer. So to that extent, operationally there is a plus. And as sir was mentioning, that if you have that positive revenue stream, then you do get finally the cash flow, that you get the return. So to that extent, this has been really a good experience for all of us. But then there are a large number of issues and mysteries which we are yet to really figure out. The original idea was that the buses, the range would be around 150 kilometers. But then our actual performance shows that the range is varying from 100 to 130 kilometers. In fact, a whole lot of questions are now coming. We are collecting data, and we are in a close collaboration with University of California at Berkeley to understand these batteries, because what is being shown on the dashboard of the buses is not the actual charged status of the battery. Now, this is quite jittery for us because you see, the driver would look at the dashboard and then go for recharging, or would say that now I will take a turn around, I will go for charging, depending on the dashboard. But then it is not showing up accurately. So that is something which we need to understand more, and this will be required for all future procurements of these vehicles, because the buses cost really depend quite a bit on the batteries, and we had fine-tuned and customized these batteries as per the average running kilometers that we thought would be needed in a typical condition in a Kolkata city. But that calibrated thing could not really happen. Then the second thing is that we also need to work a little bit on our routes, because we are realizing that when the buses are coming back, there is in some buses there is substantial unutilized battery charges, 30%, 40%. So essentially, this is an underutilization of the potential of an electric vehicle. So this is another very important issue that has come up. Now, in the initial phases, when we had put these vehicles on the road, then there was a lot of disturbance in the grid. Mr. Bajpai was explaining the grid issues and problems and so on. And indeed, there were trippings. Indeed, after 4 months, these trippings could be combated by suitably changing the software. But then the difficulty is that if you put, let's say, 500 such buses on the road, 1,000 such buses on the road, then what would happen to the grid stability? So that is something which we need to remember. The second thing is that the initial experimentation has taught us something, but it also has some limitation in the sense that there are difficulties in putting up the charging places. A smaller number of buses were there, so we could use our depots space and all that to put up the charging stations, and that was really helpful. But then imagine that if there are a very large number of such buses, and then what do you do? So these are some of the unanswered questions. Coming back to the problem of this grid and the power and ultimately shifting the load on thermally power generated, we are thinking very hard to really shift to the solar-based charging stations. And we are very hopeful that maybe that could really help us in, at least on one hand, reducing the cost of charging, and also do our operations in an off-grid manner. So that will be helpful. There are products available in the market which address this, but then we have to see how, because we need to have that space for solar panel and all. So that is another issue. So this was the first phase. Now the second phase, we are going into the OPEX model, in which under FAME 2, we are putting up some 50 buses, and these buses, it is in a PPP mode in which the private partner is putting up the buses and bearing the cost of the charging as well, whereas we are collecting the revenue that is coming, and plus we are also paying them per kilometer basis some of the operational charges. Now this is being tried on various cities of India. We are also part of that, but then the cost seems to be quite high. This is 86 rupees per kilometer is the OPEX, and that doesn't seem to be really working out. If the revenue stream, if you look at, and then it is not really, the numbers are not really working out. So this, I will just wind up now. The issue here is that the technology is changing quite fast. The technology is not fully understood by many of us, and the procurement and the format in which these buses should be procured, or there should be a PPP, and how we should go, these clarity is not yet, I mean, it is still emerging. So we are prone to mistakes. I mean, going forward, I see myself making a lot of mistakes in this sector, but hopefully with all these mistakes, it will be worth making those mistakes so that, we can really learn and factor it in our future strategy. Thank you very much.
Yes, of course, Mr. Mishra. These are definitely not mistakes. Experiments have results. All results are learning. And when, like you said, knowledge is not stable, experiments must be done to be able to create the ecosystem. Otherwise, we will wait for somebody else to do it and then to copy. The good news is that better products will come, better systems will come. You will get better buses and better batteries and so on. I was just wondering, this is actually a fantastic opportunity to optimize bus routes within the city. The use of electric buses is one. The COVID-induced slowdown is another one. We don't have to go back to the same bus network because you know how it has evolved. You suddenly put in a route in this place, and then there is a clamor for a route, so you put in another route at some other place. In Calcutta, if you see the bus numbers, 42 by C by 1A, I mean, it just shows that it's kind of grown in some random manner. And we have a wonderful opportunity using technology to rationalize the routes because we know where we have demand, where demand is lesser, what time there is demand, and so on. So I hope you will all take the opportunity, do the necessary experiments, and create a wonderful public transport system, certainly driven by batteries and electricity, but also one which is much better aligned to both technology and consumer demand, because that will, be good for everyone. So thank you very much. Wish you success. And I hope you do many more experiments and learn faster than anybody else in the country. Helping us do these experiments and, make sure that we get the best technologies is the UK-India Knowledge Exchange Program on electric mobility. So may I invite Ms. Hoymonti Poddar, Senior Energy, Climate Change and Urban Advisor Prosperity Team, UK Trade, Economics and Prosperity, British Deputy High Commission, Kolkata. That is quite a mouthful, but then Hoymonti will tell us about the UK-India Knowledge Exchange Program and how it is helping West Bengal and India proceed with electric mobility. Hoymonti, all yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ghosh. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much to the Bengal Chamber team for having me in the session. My previous speakers have provided deep insights into opportunities and challenges of adoption of electric mobility in India and showcase some of the best practices. Mr. Sen talked about Newtown, Rajarhat. Mr. Mishra talked about the fantastic work that the city of Kolkata is doing. So, we can say that fantastic work is happening across the world, and particularly in
Hoymonti, we just lost your voice.
We can't hear.
Yes.
Yeah, do we move on to Hemang then? I'll, in the meantime, check with Hoymonti.
Do that.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's listen to Mr. Hemang Shah, who's the India head of EO Charging India. He will talk to us about opportunities in faster creation of charging infrastructure. And EO Charging is a part of the UK-India Knowledge Exchange Program. So the idea was to listen to him once we knew a little bit about the program. But Hemang, all yours.
Thank you, sir. So, as said, Prosperity Fund India UK meet happened in 2019, and I thank Ms. Natalie Toms, Daniel Bradley, and Hoymonti Poddar. I could meet Charlie, the CEO of EO Charging, and an EO India startup. So I thank BCC for this opportunity. Just for knowledge, last week we were announced among the top 35 EV companies of the world, and it is selling in 30 countries, standing about the world's best AC charger manufacturing company. So today's topic would be opportunities in faster creation of charging infrastructures in cities. Well, this is a one-sided view. I've been interacting with around more than 5 to 8 people in a day. So that's huge numbers, talking to people in the industry of such a huge number. So I believe, a lot of knowledge sharing happens, a lot of experience, thoughts, they evolve, they come in, a lot of implementation we do, and we find result, as initially our spokesman spoke about it. So there are two methods that I feel. First is the central and the government funded programs, or the promoted programs, or the regulation policy making. This is one of the methods that can help in faster creation of charging infrastructures. Second is by the stakeholders, by the CSR activities, by the business opportunities that can happen. Now these business opportunities can be with the charging infrastructure. If they get adequate income, I'm sure they will pop up everywhere. And that's what is happening. There are a lot of inquiries. People are ready to pour money. They're just waiting for the COVID situation and a little bit of boost in the EV by institutes and individuals. So these are the two methods. One from the government side, from our stakeholders, and right up to institutes and individual level. So there's a question: how much charging infrastructure does India have at present? Well, to be very precise, in a small figure you can multiply. We just have 1.1 chargers per EV. So there is 1.1 charger available, in public, individual, or shared. 1.1 charger. As we have around 0.35% electric vehicles in all. The percentage maybe is accumulatively counted among two-wheelers and four-wheelers and three-wheelers. India has 360 human density per square kilometer. So India would need around 2.5 chargers per EV. So if there are 1,000 EVs sold, there will be around 2,500 chargers required in initial 3 years. After 3 years, this would go down to 2.2 and come down to a baseline of 2 chargers per EV. When EV would be flooded and it would be more than 70% of the sales of all the vehicles happening, that time it would be around 1.7 chargers per EV. So we need to have this 2.5 chargers per EV as a target to have sufficient infrastructure in India. Obviously, we need good quality and reliable products that can last for 10 years and above. So what are the barriers to increase charging infrastructure? See, I believe it's basically the mindset. The right choice of charging infrastructure is needed. People want to jump into the charging infrastructure. They want like 50 or 100 kilowatt DC charger, and they want to charge it instantly. They want to have maybe 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes that the vehicle should be charged. But there are not so many vehicles to sustain the cost of such kind of huge chargers. Per day repairing cost of 2,000 to 3,000 rupees is just to maintain the charger, to have the charger, and that much money cannot be earned from the charging. So initially, there should be an experiment of different models in single phase and three phase of AC chargers with few DC chargers where they are needed immediately. As of now, 100:1 is the requirement. 100 AC chargers to 1 AC charge. Soon as the technology improves with higher range and much more faster AC charging capabilities possible, up to 22 kilowatt like Renault Zoe. For information, Renault Zoe was the hottest selling EV in last quarter. It crossed all the sales of Tesla, Nissan Leaf, and Bolt and everything just because it's an onboard 22 kilowatt AC charging capacity. Well, so if this comes in, we need 500:1. So what happens is the infrastructure cost of holding a charger of 22 kilowatt is hardly 60,000-70,000 rupees compared to 15 to 25 or 35 lakh rupees a DC charger. So in this, the spreading of the charging infrastructure in the existing capital is quite huge possibility. So many places mindset is not ready. Home users have great hurdles. Societies and cooperatives, they need huge investment. They want to centralize the charging for their members, which is the right way. But then there should be some solution where how we can subsidize their investments or how they can be given softer interest-free loans. That would be a huge step. There is a barrier on that because I'm speaking to so many people, so many infrastructure companies, so many apartments and cooperative housing societies. I see the hurdle happening every time. The members, the committee members, few are ready, few are not ready. In the meetings, everything goes haywire and it all boils down to the investment. So, the next question, are there guidelines for charging infrastructure is required for every million vehicles on the road? Okay, well, Mr. Saurabh from EESL did cover this. There are guidelines covered in FAME already explained by him. And any work with open guideline will be welcome. It will be help, it should be there. But if in the name of guidelines there is restriction, monopolizing, it will not help. So we need to be aware about this doesn't happen. Where do most customers charge their vehicle? So now, the most customers, they charge their vehicle in their personal charging points, either at the workplace or their home places. Requirement comes with the shopping market areas and the malls. Fleets, obviously, they do at their base or the other charging infrastructure where they have partnered with. So the 70% requirement would be on the personal charging points. So when we talk about the international data, is the similar one that we are talking now that's going to be happening in India. If you see the international experience in the charging infrastructure, compared to the charging stations that they have huge individual charging infrastructure. In UK, they have made all the new apartments or flat owners or the bungalows, any condominiums, anything that is coming up, they should have their at least one parking with charging infrastructure ready. So as soon as the new infrastructure is set up, charging infrastructure has to be set up instantly with it. I mean, this will be a great help for boosting the charging infrastructure. Internationally, they have adopted. I'm sure in India they are doing something. It is already now 20% as a requirement, and it is going to go up very soon. So this covers the need of AC chargers up to 7.4 kilowatt. In other places, we will be having major AC fast charging in place up to 22 kilowatt because it costs hardly 70,000 compared to the DC charger of similar kind costing 6 to 8 lakh rupees. So you see, it can charge from 2.2 kilowatt to 22 kilowatt, anything it can do. Rest is charging infra where few DCs will be used. So that is how the international charging infrastructure has evolved. I think India is on the same footprint. So when this will happen is expected to evolve in India. This will happen very fast because I see it's a big pause that was there, but this pause is now breaking up. The barrier is breaking up. There are a lot of inquiries from small and big investors who are ready and they want to start with the charging infrastructure. So I see this happening in a very short time. We are at most in an incubation period of 1.5 years. After 1.5 years, you will see EV in a great boom and infrastructure of charging will be in place at that time. So I just wanted to keep it short. I had a little bit more, but I myself am short of time now. So thank you, Mr. Ghosh. I tried my best. I hope it's justice to everyone.
You did very well, Hema. And I was just wondering, in other conversations on green buildings, I hear 70% of the buildings India needs in 2050 are yet to be built. So if they are built with charging infrastructure, we have the problem solved there already.
Exactly.
That would be
happening. Thank you, sir.
Great. I think the situation conspired to ensure that Hoymanti had the last word. I hope she's back.
As always.
Yes.
Thank you very much. My count starts from now, I guess, 7 minutes, right? Or are you deducting time from my first 1 minute? So I'm really sorry due to the technology failure, and it's never happened that I have been in a conference and I have not had a technology failure. So I was just beginning to wonder what's happening. Everything is so fine. Anyways, just getting back to the presentation, I was, basically talking about the blue skies and the exceptional air quality experienced by the Indian cities can actually provide momentum to efforts of a green recovery and enhance ambition on adoption of electric mobility and cleaner modes of transportation. You will hear about an e-bike company towards the end of this session, which has experienced a 300% surge in demand during the COVID times. Next slide, please. Thanks. So today I'm going to quickly take you through our UK-India Knowledge Exchange program on electric mobility, which we embarked in 2019. The objective of this program has been to share innovative policies, exchange knowledge on technologies, practices, ideas, tools to help bridge the gap and get answers to the solutions that both the two countries are seeking. So India is driving towards shared, connected and electric mobility system to address both energy security and air pollution challenges. And the states and the cities are taking leadership roles in that. And it was so encouraging to hear earlier today, when the West Bengal Power Minister mentioned about states' ambition on EVs. Next slide, please. So in terms of the components of the program that we had, the first one was basically a knowledge exchange program on everything that we really talked about today, on charging infrastructure development, what would be the layout criteria, on grid impact assessment, on renewable energy integration with the grid, fleet transition program, battery, next-gen battery development program, setting up of innovative hubs, vehicle-to-grid management systems, so financial models, a wide range of activities that we spoke about. The second part of the program has been to develop state-level approach papers on basically how the states can take forward their EV ambitions, because each state is at their, at a particular level. And some of them have already announced their EV policies, some of them are yet to announce their EV policies, but then they're all getting there. So we had a number of state-level, stakeholder consultation exercises, particularly to identify the short-term, the medium-term, the long-term actions to take their ambitions forward. And the third, obviously, was to deepen our ties with the states, to basically form new partnerships with the city governments, between the businesses, think tanks, research organizations, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So in terms of the activities and the progress that we have made, we had two missions of policymakers, innovators, investors, and academia from the UK coming to India. Then delegation from India to the UK, particularly to the Go Ultra Low cities like London, Oxford, and Nottingham, with representatives from Government of India, from states and businesses. We covered 8 cities, both in UK and India, reached out to more than 1,200 stakeholders in both the countries. We held state-level consultations, we did site visits, we went to Ashok Leyland factory to understand, which has actually bought the Optier bus in the UK, the double-decker we were talking about earlier in the session about the buses and the tenders, and we saw electric double-decker buses. And so all these are happening. And in terms of the progress that the project has been able to make so far, are that the UK companies such as Amte Power, which is a lithium-ion cell company, Faradian, which is a sodium-ion cell company, then EO Charging, Hemang just spoke. We had Saita, which is powertrain company. They have forged partnerships with businesses in India, creating new jobs both in UK and India. They have set up their shops here. They have set up their manufacturing units here. Then there have been, a lot of exchanges between and partnerships between the UK universities and Indian universities on next-gen battery development and battery system management. Then we have, cities which are working towards forming partnerships with Go Ultra Low cities in the UK, particularly to exchange experience. So Go Ultra Low cities in the UK, it's a scheme. It is a program by the UK's Office of low emission vehicles, which provides funding to local government for the adoption of EVs. So there are around 6 of those cities in the UK. So we, we would very much like the exchange to happen between Newtown, Kolkata, and one of the Go Ultra Low cities, so that we can learn from each other. Then we already have Catapults UK, which are working to create a clean street test bed in Bangalore by integrating innovative electric mobility solution. And we have recently launched a UK PACT program and UK Tech Partnership program, which will focus particularly on electric mobility innovation and everything. But we basically discussed in details during this session. And we are also working on skill development with Government of India. Next slide, please. In terms of the stakeholder consultations, which we had in various states, and one we had in Kolkata as well earlier this year, they threw up some of the generic points for the states. And some of them has been like, states need to have a phase-wise plan for implementation of the EV policies, maybe something like a roadmap to take forward the ambition that can detail out the targets and steps on e-mobility transition as part of an integrated transport planning exercise. And this is something that the Transport for London has been, associating with West Bengal on. Then the stakeholders mentioned that there can be a plan for Race to Zero emission vehicles campaign with targets and phase-out plan across all EV segments of the state, big data analysis for integrating EV in transport planning exercises, so analyzing present and future mobility patterns and urban planning norms, considering the impact of the grid, tackling last mile connectivity and all these issues, development of charging infrastructure layout criteria, planning for adoption of latest technologies like wireless charging, pop-up charging, things like that, depending on the city's infrastructure. The other is definitely, as Mr. Mishra very importantly highlighted, assessment of grid impact, which would analyze the charging needs, the pattern, the energy storage, the timing, the pricing, so those things, and particularly designing and implementing the future-ready grid. So what are the kind of adjustments that need to be made, and considering the future EV demand. Next slide, please. There is, there are a few other important important issues that came up. One was, setting up of state-level center of excellence for electric mobility skilling. So if there could be intelligent mobility skill centers which could be developed with international partners, where capacity building of officials from the governments and the corporates could, for fleet transition, for example, tendering and procurement documents could be drawn up. And in fact, when we were doing the consultations in other states, we found out that some of the states are already consulting the tendering and procurement document of Kolkata. So which is a very good, example. So the other is designing charge point registry for the state. So online mapping database to develop mapping tools and other app-based services. Mr. Sen spoke about Pathadisha. So ZapMap is one such tool which particularly identifies the electric buses and electric transportation system back in the UK, and how the journeys could be planned effectively, taking personal choices, keeping personal choices in mind. The other is designing institutional framework for a battery industrialization center in the state, which can particularly focus on next-gen battery development, manufacturing of solid-state batteries, recycling of batteries, sodium-ion battery manufacturing, all these aspects, and also designing of e-mobility accelerator cell in the state, which can help, design visionary city-level schemes to drive the transition. So, and this cell can actually, support a host of activities such as the production of charging infrastructure, investment fund, there is in the UK, there's this charging infrastructure fund which is put together by the state government and by the by the businesses, which helps in providing funding for charging infrastructure deployment. Next slide, please. This particular slide talks about the launch of an EV awareness campaign through web-based platforms and maybe appointing brand ambassadors for EVs. Which can bust the myths around EVs and encourage corporates on fleet transition and also influence the uptake of passenger vehicles. The stakeholders also talked about development of plans for smart energy management system that can integrate renewable energy, which Mr. Mishra talked about, with charging at homes and offices. And, I should actually mention that there, like EO is already working with a battery management system company called Moixa, which was part of the delegation, and they are trying to identify the best possible way to deploy this. Twinning of cities between India and other countries on electric mobility, particularly to share lessons learned, for example, with Nottingham City Council, which has already achieved 30% of their fleet transition. So the conditions, again, is not similar. But then the issues and the challenges that Nottingham has faced could be some of the issues that even Kolkata or any other cities are facing. Also, city mayors and the bureaucrats can actually join International Mayors Forum to announce ICE phase-out date in the run-up to COP26. And the last point would be about developing a network of women e-rickshaw drivers for last-mile connectivity and EV entrepreneurs. Next slide, please. So I would like to end with this particular slide, and I want to reinforce my last point. This picture was taken on a very gloomy day in Delhi on 13th of November last year during the visit by Prince Charles. The AQI in Delhi on that day had crossed 1400, and we took Prince Charles on this electric auto ride driven by this lady who's 24-year-old Maria. She comes from a village which is 20 kilometers away from Allahabad in UP, and she supports a family of 8. Previously, through odd jobs, she used to make around 4,000 rupees a month. And now that she owns an electric auto and provides last mile connectivity, she is being able to earn 20,000 rupees every month. It was a very inspiring story, and it was great to see her, swap the battery from Sun Mobility battery swapping, station, which is a portable station. It's an Indo-British company, and today the best thing was that today she mentioned that she also trains and influences women from her village to join an army of 60 women e-rickshaw drivers. And this project has been supported by the UK government, and we would like to scale this project up. This is just one very small example. COVID or no COVID, initiatives like this can be scaled up. In addition, particularly Vedanta also mentioned about this point. And, these initiatives can enable us to shift gears and that can boost investment, create new jobs, and stimulate innovation even in times of COVID. And going forward, we would continue to closely work with the state governments, with Indian government, think tanks, businesses, states, and cities on policies, technologies, forging new partnerships. And I hope to, work very closely with the state government on this. And if there is any information that you would like to get from us, please do let us know. We would definitely like to see Kolkata showcasing its achievements at COP26 and catapulting itself into the new investment destination in Eastern India on electric mobility. Thank you very much. I'm sure I have crossed my time limit.
Well, I won't say anything.
Thanks.
I'm afraid I haven't managed time very well. We are a few minutes over, so if we want to take questions, I have to take permission from Angana. So, do we take questions or do we not take questions?
Maybe we take one or two questions, though we have the speakers of the next session online with us. But maybe we can take one or two questions. There is one question.
Tell us which question.
Yeah, there's one question, though Hoimonti has mentioned about the skill development, but there's one question particularly on skill development from Novonil Das of Indo-German Vocational Education Training Program, GIZ. That is, what's the status of skill development in e-mobility components, particularly in reference to employment for youths?
Would Mr. Sen want to take that? Because I'm sure he's faced some talent issues when making his experiments.
Well, I think training has not been a very strong part of us, but usually some kind of hands-on training comes from the operators themselves. And I will take this opportunity to make another point which Ms. Hoimonti Poddar said about the Accelerator Center of Excellence and the last mile for the EV. If there is a way forward in taking it in collaboration with Mr. Misra, I would be very interested to do that.
Wonderful. So my takeaway is that therefore the gentleman who asked the question has clearly managed to pinpoint another opportunity for the ecosystem to become stronger and for employment to be generated. So I'm going to last question. What would you
another question, that is, what are the measures to handle the environmental effects of manufacturing of e-vehicles?
Do we have a volunteer for that one?
I'm looking at you.
Oh, you're looking
yes.
at me. So, you know what? This is a question that's usually never asked, because the assumption is that the environmental effects of manufacturing electric vehicles is going to be immensely better than the environmental effect of manufacturing IC engine vehicles. And therefore, people usually don't have any apprehension about this. And if organizations pledge to become carbon neutral organizations, whatever may be the impact, they will be taking care of it in future. But maybe you should ask the gentleman who asked the question, or lady, I don't remember who. In case he has a follow-up, he can drop us a mail. Maybe we can learn something from the question. We are over time, so we must close. I'm not going to go on and on about all the wonderful things that have been said. If you've been listening carefully, you would have realized that this has been a great conversation. We've heard about experiments that are being done, learnings from the experiments, policies, how the policies are different, why they are different, why they should be different. And we also heard about what is expected of us from electric vehicles at a very large forum. So I'm actually going to ask Vedanta Kumar to re-articulate COP26's asks of EVs in a short, precise manner. Those 2-3 bullet points that you mentioned when you were closing, Vedanta, I thought they were very powerful. So why don't you just go ahead?
Thank you, and I will keep it short given the time. In the run-up to COP26, the UK is running an international campaign to double the pace of the transition to zero-emission vehicles. So the vision, we want a world where by 2040 or earlier, all new vehicles are zero-emission. That's globally. And we're calling on everyone to play their part. Businesses, if you have corporate fleets, to sign up to the EV100 campaign and commit to only buying zero-emission vehicles from 2030 onwards. That's a commitment in that campaign. For vehicle manufacturers and investors to work towards producing only zero-emission vehicles by 2040 or earlier. For cities and states to commit to the same and to implementing policies in line with those commitments. And we're also calling on governments to work together, and we're building a forum for governments to do this. And we'd love all of your help in enabling us to pool all your knowledge from private sector to state level, from NGOs, etc., to help governments overcome the barriers that they face in making this transition.
Thank you very much. Angana, we must make a small little clip of Vedanta Kumar's closing, make it go viral and make him the most popular government official of COP26. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Sure.
everybody, for your contribution. Thank you to the audience for listening to us very patiently and asking your questions. I'm afraid we couldn't take too many. Thank you very much, and please enjoy the next session. And I'm sure there'll be a video coming up now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah. So we will play the video of Go Zero Bike